And I'm sure many of you, like me, are intrigued by this mysterious effigy mound and the many theories about its possible astronomical alignments. While there is no single universally accepted theory about what the Serpent Mound means or why it was built, one thing is certain. The shape of the earthwork is one of the most impressive and unique examples of earthen architecture to survive from pre-contact North America. This is what makes it such a compelling subject for discussion today. I am by no means an expert on the Serpent Mound, but I am eager to share my research and hear your thoughts on this amazing site. Please keep in mind, everything I say here is based on my understanding of the available research. And since this is such a popular topic among armchair archaeologists, pseudo-archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists, I've tried to stick mainly with academics who have published their findings in reputable peer-reviewed journals. With that said, let's dive right into it. When discussing possible purposes for the construction of the Serpent Mound, it helps to break down what we know it is and isn't. We know that it was constructed entirely of dirt and no mortar or concrete was used. We know that it was built without the use of metals like copper or iron, which were both rare in prehistoric America. And we know that it was designed as an image of a serpent with a head, neck, body, and tail. The next thing to consider is the scale of the monument. Over 1,300 feet long, the Serpent Mound covers 6.5 acres and is estimated to contain between 4,500 and 6,000 cubic feet of earth, while the longest Great Pyramid of Giza measures just over 700 feet at the base and contains over 5 million cubic feet of stone. The Serpent Mound would fit comfortably inside the smaller Second Pyramid of Khafre at Giza, and would even fill a third of the largest pyramid of Khufu. This is not meant to minimize the accomplishment of constructing the Serpent Mound. After all, moving and placing millions of stones required far more effort than shoveling dirt. But it's important to understand how relatively small the Serpent Mound is compared to large-scale constructions around the world. Another thing to consider is its location. The mound is located on top of a ridge overlooking the surrounding area. At its highest point, it is approximately 100 feet above the lowest point of the ridge, making it impossible to see the full extent of the serpent shape from any vantage point on the ground. In fact, the mound was probably never intended to be viewed up close. Instead, it was meant to be seen from above. Aerial photographs taken in the 1970s were the first to reveal the full scale of the monument. And it was until NASA released images taken from space that the true genius of the Serpent Mound became apparent. Some argue that this placement on top of a ridge was no accident and that it relates to some sort of astronomical event or phenomenon. However, if this were the case, there is no evidence of tools or technology capable of producing such accuracy. So, it seems that the builders of the Serpent Mound chose a location that was already aligned with the sky rather than trying to build an observatory. Now let's get back to the question of scale. The next comparison we can make is between the Serpent Mound and the nearby Hopewell Culture National Historical Park, which was occupied from roughly 100 BC to 500 AD by the Hopewell people. Within this park are two large geometric enclosures called the octagon and the square. Together they measure nearly half a mile across. By comparison, the entire Serpent Mound is only a quarter-mile across. Also within the park are numerous smaller mounds, including one named the Great Circle, which contains 72 small conical mounds arranged in a circle. The scale of the Serpent Mound becomes even more apparent when we compare it to the Great Circle. Each of the cones within the circle measures about 10 feet across and is about 2 feet tall, containing less dirt than the average American backyard sandbox. Yet there are 72 of them. The Serpent Mound is a massive structure by comparison. This brings us to the main argument against the idea that the Serpent Mound was used for astronomical observations. Simply put, it is too imprecise. There are no observable astronomical alignments that can be definitively linked to the Serpent Mound, while some have suggested that the head points to the rising sun on the summer solstice and that the body aligns with the moon's path across the sky. These claims cannot be verified. Conversely, there are dozens of other potential alignments that could be made, but unfortunately, none of them hold up to scrutiny. Many of these alignments simply aren't visible from the Serpent Mound itself, and others require a level of precision that would be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve without advanced tools and technology. Perhaps the best example of this is the claim made by Scott Wagner in his book Ohio's Serpent Mound. Wagner argues that the Serpent Mound was designed to align with the four cardinal directions as well as the solstices and equinoxes. He claims that the tail of the serpent points to the North Star, and that each of its 7 coils corresponds with one of the 7 visible planets, including the Sun and the Moon. Now, if this were true, it would be incredible. But unfortunately, Mr. Wagner's claims are based on incorrect measurements and alignments. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the enthusiasm and curiosity of armchair archaeology, and I appreciate that amateur researchers like M.R. Wagner are interested in preserving sites like the Serpent Mound and sharing their findings with others. But it is important to rely on accurate data and sound reasoning when conducting archaeological research. After all, the last thing we want to do is spread misinformation and propagate false theories. Now, in the past, lack of precision has also been used to support more controversial claims. For example, some believe that the Serpent Mound is proof of extraterrestrial contact, and others believe that it was constructed by a lost civilization of giants. These ideas are not supported by the scientific community, but they continue to persist in fringe circles. So with all of this in mind, what exactly are we to make of the Serpent Mound? Well, the truth is that its purpose remains a mystery. There are no written records and no artifacts to provide clues. All we have are the shapes in the soil and the stories of the people who first encountered the mound. Unfortunately, these stories are often contradictory and unreliable. Early explorers claimed to have discovered the mound during the Revolutionary War, while others insisted it had always been there. Some believed it was the work of Native Americans, while others argued that it was a natural formation. As the years went on, more and more explorers came forward with their own stories and theories. In 1894, a local farmer named David Weir claimed to have uncovered a skeleton at the site. While this was never proven, the story stuck around and many people began to believe that the Serpent Mound was a burial site. In the 1950s, Graham Hancock visited the site and wrote about it in his book America Before. He argued that the mound was much older than previously thought, and that it was part of a larger network of ancient sites across North America. Mr. Hancock's theories were highly speculative and were not well received by the academic community. But once again, they continue to circulate in fringe circles. In recent years, new theories have emerged suggesting that the Serpent Mound is an astronomical observatory and that it was used to track the movements of the sun and the stars. However, these claims are also highly speculative and are not widely accepted. As I mentioned earlier, there have been attempts to date the Serpent Mound using radiocarbon dating methods. This involves analyzing organic material found at the site, such as charcoal or bone fragments. However, these attempts have yielded conflicting results and have done little to shed light on the mound's true age. Today, the Serpent Mound continues to baffle researchers and fascinate visitors from around the world. While we may never know its true purpose, we can appreciate the mystery and wonder of this ancient site. Perhaps the most important lesson we can take away from the Serpent Mound is to remain humble in the face of the unknown. There are still so many mysteries in our world that we may never fully understand, and it is important to be open to the possibility that there may be things beyond our comprehension. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you for watching.
Hey there, welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring the enigmatic Serpent Mound in Ohio. But unlike our usual format, we won't be tackling it head-on. We'll save the facts and figures for another time. Instead, we're going back even deeper. We're setting aside what we think we know and asking a question that's both simple and profound. Why do we keep coming back to this place? Before we get into it, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our latest videos. Long before the first roads were cut into these lands, long before steel met stone, or a single plow turned the soil, this land was alive with people, with ceremony, with meaning. To understand the Serpent Mound, we must first understand the cultures that shaped this land with their hands and their minds. For the Serpent Mound does not stand alone. It is part of a vast tradition, a legacy of ancient American earthworks that ripple silently through time, like echoes in the soil. These cultures are often grouped by archaeologists into names like the Adena, the Hopewell, and the Fort Ancient. Their names are not their own. They come from the places where evidence of their lives was first uncovered. Burial mounds, ceremonial centers, and intricate trade goods discovered across the Ohio River Valley. From the rolling woodlands of what is now Kentucky to the broad plains of Illinois. These were the mound builders, and they were more than simple tribes or isolated villages. They were the architects of sacred landscapes, the adena, builders of the first mounds, the adena. Culture flourished from around 1000 BCE to 200 BCE. They were among the first in this region to build conical burial mounds, rounded earth domes that still rise above the forests today, some nearly 70 feet high. These mounds often held graves, but they were not merely cemeteries. They were spiritual landmarks, gathering places, places of ceremony and renewal. The adena left no written language, no stone temples, but they left form, shape, symmetry, and ritual embedded in the earth. They crafted pipes in the shape of animals, built circular enclosures, and carefully buried their dead with goods from distant lands. Copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, obsidian from the Rockies. It was a network, a quiet one, carried on trails, spoken in ritual. A civilization not marked by palaces, but by the shapes it left behind. Could the Serpent Mound have been their work? Some believe so. Charcoal found beneath one of the coils dates to around 320 BCE, a time that would place its construction in the final centuries of the Adena era. Its proximity to known Adena burial mound, some just steps awaits wait to the idea. But if the Adena built the Serpent Mound, it represents a leap in vision. This isn't a simple burial dome. It is a deliberate, massive, symbolic structure. Something beyond the body, perhaps aimed toward the spirit or the sky. The Hopewell, a flourishing complexity centuries later. From about 100 BCE to 500 CE, the Hopewell culture emerged, possibly descending from or overlapping with the Adena. The Hopewell are known for taking mound building to new levels of sophistication. Their earthworks expanded in scale and in precision. They built vast geometrical complexes, squares, circles, and octagons, some aligned with astronomical events. Cone, Ohio. They built an octagon earthwork believed to track the complex cycles of the moon over 18.6 years. In Chillicothe, they constructed a series of ceremonial enclosures connected by processional paths spanning miles. To walk among them today is to step into ancient geometry carved into grass and soil. Their artistry went beyond earth. Hopewell artisans created jewelry from mica, carved effigies from stone, and even crafted ceremonial copper breastplates. They were not an empire in the traditional sense, no central capital. No armies, but they were deeply connected. A spiritual network spanning the Mississippi and Ohio valleys. Could the builders of Serpent Mound have been part of this movement? It's possible, though most current dating suggests the mound predates the Hopewell's height. Still, the idea that the Serpent Mound fits into this broader tradition of sacred geometry, of celestial alignment, of earth as canvas seems undeniable. The Fort Ancient, a living memory still later, from around 1000 to 1650 CE. The Fort Ancient culture rose in southern Ohio. They lived in villages along rivers, practiced agriculture, and built both defensive structures and ceremonial spaces. For years, archaeologists believed they were the builders of the Serpent Mound. Based on early excavations and artifact styles found nearby, the Fort Ancient people were no less spiritual than their predecessors. Their villages had central plazas, mounds, and community structures that suggest deep ritual life. Their artifacts show continued connections to broader indigenous traditions, pipes, effigies, and sacred objects passed hand to hand, story to story. But newer carbon dating suggests they may have only reused or modified the Serpent Mound. Mount built it from scratch. Perhaps it had already stood for centuries, and they adopted it, much like medieval cathedrals were built atop older sacred sites. If true, then the Serpent Mound is even more remarkably became a timeless monument, transcending cultures, adopted by generations as something sacred. A quiet genius, these cultures did not build with steel or stone. They had no metal chisels, no beasts of burden. And yet, they moved tons of earth, using little more than baskets, sticks, and their bare hands. Try to imagine that. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people slowly building up the form of a serpent across weeks, months, or years, each scoop of earth carried in woven baskets, each curve laid with intention. No machines, no blueprints, only memory, tradition, and the sky above. To many, these builders were seen as primitive. Early archaeologists often assume that native cultures could not have built such complex monuments. Some even proposed that a lost race, Atlanteans, Egyptians, or Celts must have done it. But over time, the truth emerged. The indigenous peoples of North America had built these works with vision, with patience, with purpose. The landscape as legacy. When you step into the world of the mound builders, you step into a culture where the land itself was a storybook. Hills were not just hills. Rivers were not just water. Every curve, every mound, every path carved through grass and forest was a symbol part of a sacred geography. To walk this land was to walk through ceremony, and the Serpent Mound stands at the heart of that story. Whether built by Adena, Hopewell, Fort Ancient, or a combination of them, Alit remains a testament to something enduring, something that reaches beyond culture or date. A message written not in ink or stone, but in form, in silence. And so we begin to see the Serpent Mound is not alone. It is the crown jewel of a vast tradition, a tradition where earth becomes art and time becomes sacred. And so we return to our question. Why do we keep coming back to this place? The Serpent Mound does not yield easy answers. It doesn't speak in words, and it speaks volumes. It has survived floods, fires, and the passage of millennia. It keeps watch over a landscape that has changed beyond recognition. It has witnessed the seasons turning again and again. Through it all, it has remained. Why does it call to us? Perhaps it's the mystery, the puzzle of how it was made and why. Perhaps it's the scale, the sheer effort of moving earth and rock to make it. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Maybe it's the silence. The mound is silent, and in its silence, it invites us to listen. To listen to the whispers of those who came before, to hear the stories the earth is willing to tell. When we stand before the Serpent Mound, we are standing on sacred ground. It is a place where the earth remembers. It holds the stories of countless generations. And it's a place where we can connect to something larger than ourselves, something that has endured for centuries. Thanks for watching. What do you find most compelling about the Serpent Mound? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to stay updated for more journeys into history and archaeology. Section 3. The design of the serpent. To truly appreciate the Serpent Mound is to appreciate the deliberate elegance of its design. On a quiet morning, the mist clings to the trees that line the ancient ridge in Adams County, Ohio. Dew sparkles on the grass that now covers the coiled earth. To the casual eye, the mound might appear simply as a curious rise, uneven ridge, perhaps a natural feature. But as you begin to walk its length, something astonishing begins to unfold beneath your feet. This serpent is not a random or haphazard figure. It is an intentional and highly refined composition, a precise image rendered not in paint or stone, but in soil. At the eastern end of the serpent mound lies the head of the snake. It is broad and flat, its mouth opened in a great, sweeping arc that seems to cradle a single, prominent, egg-shaped oval. This egg or orb measures over 30 feet in length and is clearly set apart from the rest of the body. Some see in this a serpent consuming the egg, perhaps a symbol of creation, life emerging from chaos. Others interpret it as the serpent giving birth to the egg, a symbol of fertility, the cycle of death and rebirth. Still others believe it represents the sun, or even the moon, being swallowed or protected by the serpent. The serpent's head itself aligns almost perfectly with the point on the horizon where the summer solstice sunset occurs. On June 21st, as the sun lowers in the sky, it sets directly behind the serpent's head. Coincidence, perhaps. But as we move further along its body, the patterns begin to multiply. The body and its 7 coils. From the head, the serpent's body begins to wind westward, undulating in a rhythmic series of 7 coils. These coils are not identical, but each is measured, balanced, and flowing an interplay of curves and symmetry suggestive of a living serpent in motion. The number 7 itself is symbolic across cultures, often representing spiritual completeness. The 7 visible planets, or the days of the week. Whether this number held the same meaning for the builders of the Serpent Mound is unknown, but the choice of 7 distinct curves is unlikely to be accidental. Some scholars propose that these coils align with lunar standstills, complex celestial events that occur over an 18.6-year cycle, where the moon rises and sets at its most extreme points on the horizon. Indeed, several of the serpent's coils have been argued to mark these lunar points. If true, it would suggest the mound's creators possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge and the ability to track and predict lunar behavior over decades. But even without these potential alignments, the shape of the serpent's body evokes movement. It seems to slither, twist, and glide, even though it is immobile. It is a living image carved into still earth. Walking alongside the coils, you begin to feel the rhythm of its shape, not mechanical, but organic. It is art born of nature. The tail, at the western end of the mound, lies perhaps its most enigmatic feature: the triple-coiled spiral tail. Unlike the smooth waves of the body, the tail wraps tightly in upon itself, coiling in a near-perfect spiral of 3 rings. Spirals are among the oldest symbols in human history, found carved into stones from Ireland to Peru. From petroglyphs in the American Southwest to ancient tombs and altars, spirals can represent many things: the passage of time, the journey inward, the winding path of life and death. In some indigenous traditions, the spiral is associated with water or with the journey of the soul through the afterlife. In the Serpent Mound, the tail's triple spiral may have functioned as a ceremonial space or as a marker of cyclical time. It may have even served as a mnemonic device, a kind of memory spiral, where each loop represented an era, a ritual, or a cosmological idea. The fact that the tail coils toward the west, the direction of the setting sun, also holds symbolic weight. In many Native American traditions, the west represents death, the spirit world, or transformational fitting associations for a spiral that leads inward. Proportions and placement. One of the most remarkable features of the Serpent Mound is not just its shape, but its scale and setting. Stretching over 1,348 feet in length, it is the largest effigy mound of its kind in the world. The average height of the mound is just about 3 feet, with the head reaching about 4 to 5 feet in elevation, making it more subtle when viewed from the ground. But from above, its proportions are breathtaking, graceful, balanced, and elegant in a way that suggests both mathematical planning and artistic vision. The mound rests atop a geological ridge that itself is a natural anomaly, part of a meteor crater called the Serpent Mound crypto-explosion structure. This elevated platform provides visibility and prominence, enhancing the monument's appearance from afar and possibly contributing to its sacred status. It's as though the earth itself was shaped to host the serpent. Furthermore, nearby Adena and Fort ancient burial mounds suggest that this area was used ceremonially for generations, perhaps because of the unique geography or the energy ancient peoples felt in the land. Symbolism beyond sight. What is the serpent? Across time and cultures, the serpent has represented life and death, destruction and creation, evil and healing. In some traditions, it's a symbol of chaos. In others, it is wisdom and eternity. It sheds its skin and emerges renewed in eternal cycle of rebirth. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, was a creator deity. In Hinduism, Ingas are divine serpents. In North America, many tribes told stories of horned serpents, thrallful, wise, sometimes dangerous beings that dwelled in lakes and rivers. Some Shawnee legends speak of a great serpent, a guardian of the underworld. To the builders of this mound, the serpent may have held spiritual power beyond any modern understanding, a creature that slithers between the worlds of sky, water, and earth. In this light, the Serpent Mound may not be just a picture, but a living presence, one that lies coiled and waiting, whispering through the wind and trees. Final reflections. The design of the Serpent Mound invites interpretation, but resists conclusion. Every curve seems to speak, but in a language lost to time. Was it a calendar, a ritual site, a work of art, a sacred protector? Perhaps it was all of these, or something more. What we can say is this: it was not accidental. It was planned, and it was revered. Every foot of its length was shaped with care, and it endures as a breathtaking example of prehistoric vision that used only earth and space to create something immortal. And so the serpent lies in eternal motion, never moving. A story in curves, a mystery in green. Section 4. Legends of the snake before maps were drawn, before borders and fences marked the land. There were stories. Stories that flowed like rivers through generations, carried not in books or ink, but in song, memory, and the telling voice of elders. In these stories, the world was alive. Every stone had a spirit, every animal a lesson. And among the most powerful of these beings was the serpent. Across the North American continent, long before the arrival of European settlers, many indigenous peoples told tales of giant serpent creatures of immense power, mystery, and spiritual weight. To understand the possible meaning behind the Serpent Mound, we must turn to these stories, not for definitive answers, but for echoes. Echoes that still resonate in the hills of southern Ohio. The Great Serpent. Among the Shawnee, who lived in and around the Ohio River Valley, stories were told of a great serpent that lived deep in rivers and lakes. It was said to be immense, its body longer than any tree, its eyes glowing like coals. This serpent was not merely a beast, but a spirit, a guardian, a force of both danger and respect. The Shawnee word for this being is often rendered as me-she-na-ma, or Misigan-big in related Algonquian languages. It lived beneath the water and could cause storms and floods when angered. But it was not always evil. Sometimes it protected sacred places or taught lessons through dreams. It was complex, like the waters it inhabited. Was the Serpent Mound a tribute to such a being, a gesture of reverence, or perhaps a warning? We may never know, but the parallels are striking. The sinuous body, the immense size, the head facing westward, the direction associated with death and the spirit world. The mound lies near Brush Creek, a winding waterway. Water and serpents are often linked in indigenous stories, just as they are in mythologies across the world. The horned serpent. In the stories of the Cherokee, Ojibwa, and Iroquois, a different serpent emerges: the horned serpent. This creature, sometimes called Utena, had antlers or horns and was said to live in caves, lakes, or under waterfalls. It was dazzling, covered in gems or scales that glistened, and it was dangerous. It guarded treasures, sacred spaces, and pathways to other worlds. But the horned serpent was also a keeper of knowledge. In some stories, those who approached it with respect could receive visions, healing, or wisdom. In others, it was a deadly trickster, luring the unworthy to their end. Could the triple spiral tail of the Serpent Mound be symbolic of a portal journey into such a hidden world? Could the mound itself be a protective guardian of a sacred landscape? The coiled form, the egg, the isolated ridgeall suggest a monument with more than earthly meaning. The serpent as a threshold, as a sentinel. The rainbow serpent far beyond North America, across oceans and deserts. The rainbow serpent slithers through Australian Aboriginal mythology. It is one of the oldest continuing mythic traditions on Earth, though completely unrelated to the cultures of Ohio. The similarity is haunting. The rainbow serpent is a creator, a destroyer, a bringer of rain and fertility. It carved rivers through the land. It curled in the earth and shaped hills and valleys. Its body became geography. This universal pattern, the serpent as a shaper of land and spirits, something fundamental, something deep in the human psyche. Why a serpent? Because it moves between worlds. It glides through water. It hides beneath earth. It slithers through the forest floor, unseen. It appears suddenly, silently. And when it sheds its skin, it is reborn, renewed, eternal. Perhaps this is why so many indigenous traditions, not just in the Americas, but globally, place the serpent at the center of creation and mystery. Dreams and vision quests among many indigenous tribes. Vision quests were a rite of passage. A young person would fast, isolate themselves in nature, and seek guidance through dreams or signs. Often, spirit animals would appear in these dreams, free or warning. The serpent were warning. The serpent was one of the most powerful spirit animals that could appear. The dream of a serpent might signify that great wisdom was coming, but also that one must tread carefully. The serpent could not be controlled. It could teach, but only on its own terms. Some anthropologists speculate that sacred sites like the Serpent Mound may have been used during such rituals. Places where the boundary between the human world and the spirit world was thin. To lie within the coils of the great earth serpent, to face the sunset in solitude, may have been part of a deeply personal spiritual journey. A story without words. It's important to remember that the indigenous peoples who built and lived near Serpent Mound did not leave behind written stories. Their history was passed down through oral tradition songs, dances, ceremonial chants, and stories told by firelight. But when settlers arrived and tribes were forced from their ancestral lands, many of these traditions were lost. Some were erased, others changed or faded. Today, we are left with fragment legends, dreams, myths told secondhand or written down by outsiders who may not have fully understood their meaning. But through those fragments, we catch glimpses: a glowing serpent under the lake, a spirit that guards the western sky, a winding path that leads inward, a story written in earth, meant to be walked, not read, a living symbol. To the people of the past, the serpent was not an idea. It was alive. It lived in the rivers, in the clouds, in the earth. To build it in soil was not just to honor. It was to make it present, to bring the spirit into form. The Serpent Mound may have been a place of prayer, of initiation, of fear, of awe. Perhaps each generation interpreted it differently. Perhaps its meaning shifted with the stars. Even today, native groups and spiritual seekers make pilgrimages to the mound. They walk the curves. They leave offerings. They meditate in the spiral of the tail. Because the serpent still speaks not in words, but in presence. It reminds us that some stories are told not with voice, but with landscape. That some truths are not meant to be explained, only felt. And so, in the hills of Ohio, the serpent waits, coiled in patience, whispering to those who listen. Section 5. Serpent in the Sky. Astronomical alignment. On the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, the sun sets directly in line with the head of the Serpent Mound. This alignment is not accidental. As the orange disk dips below the tree-lined horizon, the serpent appears to swallow the sun nor cradle it, depending on how one interprets the symbolism. The moment is fleeting, yet deeply poetic. It is as though time itself pauses while the sun, sky, and earth align in silent ceremony. For generations, researchers have speculated whether the builders of the Serpent Mound created it as an astronomical mark or a celestial calendar written in curves. And while absolute proof remains elusive, the mound's alignments with solar and lunar events suggest the ancient people who built it were sky watchers, keen observers of the heavens. The solstice connection, the most compelling alignment of the Serpent Mound, is its orientation to the summer solstice sunset. When standing at the serpent's tail, one can trace the line of its body through the coils to the open mouth, which faces almost exactly where the sun sets on June 21st, the longest day of the year. On this day, light lingers just a little longer, and the world seems to glow. To ancient peoples, this was not just a natural event, was a sacred moment. Solstices marked the turning points of the year, the cycles of planting and harvest, of warmth and cold, of birth and decline. All depended on understanding the sun's journey. Many ancient civilizations built temples and monuments to track these changes: the pyramids, Stonehenge, Chaco Canyon. The Serpent Mound may well be part of that same global tradition. But the story doesn't end with the sun, lunar standstills, and serpent coils. The moon, unlike the sun, has a more complicated path across the sky. Every 18.6 years, the moon reaches what is called a major lunar standstill, the point at which it rises and sets at its most extreme northern and southern points. Several researchers have found that the curves of the Serpent Mound correspond to these extreme lunar points. That is, if you stand in certain positions along the mound and look outward, you can see where the moon rises or sets during these rare events. These alignments are subtle, more delicate than the solstice and would require long-term observation and oral knowledge passed down across generations. If the builders were tracking these cycles, they were not only observant, they were astronomers of high precision. The egg and the sun, the egg or oval shape at the mouth of the serpent, may also represent a celestial body. Some believe it could signify the sun itself, caught at its moment of rebirth. Others propose it is the full moon, or even Venus, the morning star revered in many indigenous traditions. To ancient eyes, the heavens were a map of time, and celestial objects were not distant. Lifeless bodies, they were living spirits, dancing across the sky in rhythm with the earth. The serpent, then, may have been a cosmic guidance body, a mirror of the stars above. Sky lore and sacred landscape. Many Native American traditions did not separate the sky from the earth. They were part of a unified whole. The stars were ancestors, animals, teachers. The Milky Way was often described as a path of spirits, a celestial road the souls of the dead would travel. To lie within the coils of the Serpent Mound at night under a clear sky was likely more than beautiful. It was spiritual. Perhaps it was a ritual observatory where priest astronomers watched the heavens and timed ceremonies. Perhaps it was a place where the living could commune with the cosmos, ask questions, or mark the passage of sacred time. Beyond function award, meaning even if the Serpent Mound did function as an astronomical tool, its purpose may not have been scientific in the modern sense. It was likely spiritual, symbolic, part of a worldview in which time, nature, and the divine were deeply interconnected. The people who built the Serpent Mound did not just observe the sky, they lived by it. They listened to its rhythms. They saw stories in its constellations. And when they shaped the serpent into the earth, they may have been writing a cosmic poem, one that we are only beginning to understand. And so the serpent gazes skyward, still waiting for the next solstice, the next full moon, the next visitor who looks up and wonders. Section 6. Builders of the Mound who built the Serpent Mound. It is perhaps the central question and, still, one of the most debated. For over a century, scholars have searched for the identity of the people who shaped this massive effigy into the earth? The answer has shifted over time as science progressed and new evidence emerged. What we now believe is that the Serpent Mound was created by a Native American culture, most likely one of three: the Adena, the Hopewell, or the Fort Ancient Peoples. But even this answer is more complex than it appears. The adena hypothesis, for many years, scholars believed the Adena culture, which flourished from around 1000 BCE to 200 BCE, was responsible for building the Serpent Mound. This was based in part on the presence of nearby conical burial mounds attributed to the Adena, as well as early carbon dating from materials found beneath the serpent. In the 1990s, a radiocarbon test dated charcoal found beneath part of the mound to around 300 BCE, strongly suggesting that the structure may indeed date to the Adena era. The Adena were known for creating ceremonial earthworks and burial mounds. They revered circular forms, often associating them with the sacred. Their work was spiritual, symbolic, and often aligned with cosmological principles. If the Adena built the Serpent Mound, it would represent one of their most sophisticated and symbolic creations, a monumental expression of spirituality and astronomical knowledge. The Four Ancient theory, earlier in the 20th century, the dominant theory was that the Four Ancient culture constructed the mound. This was based on artifacts such as pottery and tools found nearby that dated to the Fort Ancient period. Some scholars suggested that the mound may have served as a calendar or ceremonial space for Fort Ancient people, who were primarily maize farmers and had a rich ceremonial life. However, more recent dating evidence suggests the Fort Ancient peoples may have reused or reinterpreted the mound rather than constructing it themselves. In other words, the mound may have already existed by the time Fort Ancient people lived nearby, and they continued to use it in their own way, perhaps for rituals, sky watching, or storytelling. The Hopewell connection. The Hopewell culture, known for its elaborate ceremonial centers and geometrically precise earthworks, has also been considered a potential candidate. Although there's less direct evidence linking the Hopewell to the Serpent Mound, their knowledge of astronomy and spiritual symbolism makes them a plausible contributor not to the construction, then perhaps to its preservation or reinterpretation over time, a shared legacy. One of the more intriguing possibilities is that multiple cultures contributed to the Serpent Mound's history. It may have been built by the Adena, modified or revered by the Hopewell, and adopted by the Fort Ancient as a sacred site. Each culture could have added layers of meaning, shaped rituals, or reimagined its purpose. This pattern is not uncommon. Sacred spaces often outlive the civilizations that built them, reused, revered, repurposed. Just as medieval churches were built atop pagan shrines, Ancient mounds in North America may have passed from culture to culture like spiritual torches, a silent legacy. Regardless of who built the mound, what remains clear is that it was created by a people with deep knowledge of the land, astronomical insight, and spiritual intent. These builders left no written record, no tablets or scrolls. But they left something, perhaps more enduring, a symbol carved into the living earth, large enough to be seen by the gods. They did not use iron or wheels. They moved the earth with baskets, shovels of wood and bone, and sheer will. Their names are lost to time, but their work endures. And as you stand at the edge of the coils, with the sun above and the forest quiet around you, you feel their presence in the silence, in the design, in the stillness that speaks. Section 7. Time buried in the earth, the Serpent Mound, for all its grandeur, might easily have been forgotten. In fact, for centuries, it almost was. After its creation, whether by the adena, fort, ancient, or both, it stood alone, slowly overtaken by the forest. Grass grew over its coils. Trees sprouted in its tail. Rain and wind wore down its form. To passing eyes, it may have seemed like just another ridge or hump in the land, but the earth holds memory, and the serpent waited. Rediscovery in the 1800s, the first documented European-American mention of the serpent. Mound came in the early 19th century as settlers expanded into Ohio. Yet even then, its true shape remained elusive. It was only when viewed from an elevated vantage point or mapped from above that its serpent form could be recognized. In 1846, surveyors Ephraim Squire and Edwin Davis visited the site and produced a detailed map. Published in their influential book, Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. This work helped draw attention to the mound, not just in the U.S., but around the world. It captured imaginations, but even then, the mound faced danger. The threat of destruction by the late 1800s, land speculators and developers saw the mound not as a sacred site, but as a curiosity, or worse, a nuisance. Trees were cleared, portions of the mound were nearly flattened. The sacred curves were in peril of vanishing under the plow. The serpent, so long forgotten, was now at risk of being erased entirely. It was then that a new guardian stepped in. Frederick Ward Putnam and Preservation in 1886. Harvard archaeologist Frederick Ward Putnam arrived at the Serpent Mound to conduct formal excavations. He was struck not only by its beauty, but by its fragility. Putnam worked tirelessly to document the site. He supervised the excavation of nearby mounds, carefully collected artifacts, and confirmed that the serpent itself contained no burials, suggesting it was ceremonial, not funerary. Most importantly, he led a campaign to preserve the mound. Thanks to his efforts, in 1887. The Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University purchased the land surrounding the Serpent Mound and established a preserve one of the first archaeological conservation efforts in the United States. The serpent had found its protector. Restoration and rediscovery over the next century. The mound would be restored, maintained, and studied. In the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps helped stabilize the site. Paths were cleared. Trees were trimmed. The coils re-emerged from obscurity. Later, aerial photography and eventually drone imaging allowed for more accurate studies of the mound's shape and alignments. New radiocarbon dating techniques provided deeper insight into its age. Interpretive centers were built. Visitors began to come not in crowds, but in quiet curiosity. Today, the Serpent Mound is a National Historic Landmark, recognized not only for its age, but for its profound cultural significance. It is no longer just a mystery. It is a memory preserved, honored, alive. And as we walk its curves in modern shoes, with modern questions, we walk in the footprints of those who first shaped it, those who moved earth and sky to speak through time. Section 8. The egg and the spiral when gazing upon the Serpent Mound from above. Two features stand out almost immediately. The egg-shaped oval at the serpent's mouth and the triple spiral that forms its tail. These shapes are not incidental. They are central. Each holds symbolic weight. Each may contain clues to the deeper meanings the builders inscribed into the earth nod through language, but through form. They speak not in sentences, but in archetypes, universal symbols, and in many ancient traditions and every continent, these shapes recur again and again, echoing through sacred art, astronomy, and myth. The egg, creation, light, and renewal. The oval, or egg, that the serpent appears to be swallowing, measures about 30 feet long and 20 feet wide. It sits perfectly aligned within the mouth of the serpent, framed by the curving upper and lower jaws. But what is it? Some early interpretations imagined it as a sun-disked serpent consuming the sun as it sets, linking the mound to solar cycles and the summer solstice. Others believed it symbolized the cosmic egg, an ancient concept found in mythologies from Egypt to India, where the egg represents the origin of the universe, the moment of first creation. In Native American lore, eggs are not always literal. They are seeds, stars, beginnings. An egg is a container of potential. It holds life not yet formed. It is transformation waiting to happen. If the serpent is a guardian of cosmic forces, then the egg may be that which it protects her, that which it releases, swallowing or birthing. This duality, consumption versus creation, is central to many interpretations of the serpent mound. If the serpent is swallowing the egg, it may represent the return of life into death, the setting sun, or the eternal recycling of the soul. But if the serpent is birthing the egg, spelling it becomes a symbol of fertility, of light emerging from darkness, of new beginnings. Both interpretations are possible. Both are meaningful. And perhaps that is the point. Ancient symbols were not always rigid. They were layered, open to personal and ceremonial meaning. The egg might represent the sun one day, and the moon the next. It might be time itself, always reborn. The spiral tail at the opposite end of the serpent's body lies the triple spiral tila tightly wound series of 3 coiling loops. Unique in its design compared to the smoother, wave-like coils of the body. Too many eyes, the spiral suggests movement inward. A journey not outward into the world, but into the self, or the underworld, or the mysteries of time. Spirals are among the oldest motifs in human art. They are found carved into rocks in Ireland, painted on pottery in the American Southwest, etched into bones and shells from prehistoric Asia and Europe. They represent cycles, life, death, rebirth, time, the seasons, the lunar phases, generations, journey, both physical and spiritual, cosmic movement, galaxies, stars, the flow of energy. In the case of the serpent mound, the triple spiral may symbolize the culmination of the serpent's power, a place of focus, of stillness, of introspection, a portal, a memory, a map. Some scholars have proposed that the egg and spiral are gateways. The egg, a gate of birth or creation. The spiral, a gate of descent or reflection. Between them, the body of the serpent connects these two poles, forming a cosmic pathway, a sacred narrative in landform. Others have noted that the triple spiral is not unlike the triskel, a symbol in Celtic tradition composed of 3 spiraling arms. Though there is no known direct connection, the similarity invites contemplation of shared human symbolism across time and geography. In certain Native American traditions, spirals represent memory trails, paths one could follow in the spirit world, or maps of ancestral wisdom passed from elder to youth. Could the triple spiral tail of the serpent mound have been such a memory trail? Could it have been a ritual site where individuals walked inward during ceremonies, each step bringing them closer to a vision, a revelation, or the ancestral realm? We cannot say for certain, but the shape speaks, and it speaks in a language older than words. Unified symbolism, the brilliance of the serpent mound, lies not in just one feature, but in how all the features interact. The egg is life. The serpent's body is the journey. The spiral is reflection, or the end of the cycle. Taken together, they may represent a cosmic story. Birth gives movement through time, gives return to origin. This is the rhythm of all things, of the sun, of the moon, of us. And in the silence of the Ohio hills, that story still unfolds with every step along the ancient curves. Section 9. A map of the cosmos. To walk the Serpent Mound is to walk through a map not of a place, but of an idea. It is a cartography of belief, a diagram of time, sky, life, and death. For its builders, the earth was not merely ground beneath their feet. It was a mirror of the heavens, a canvas for spiritual truths. And so they shaped the land to match the stars. Let us explore this idea. The Serpent Mound as a cosmic diagramma, symbolic representation of the universe, the soul and the divine. Earth as sky. Many indigenous cultures in North America believed in a three-part cosmos. The upper world, the sky, home of the sun, moon, stars, and spirit beings. The middle world, the earth, where humans, animals, and trees live. The lower world, the waters, the underworld, a realm of ancestors and spirits. The serpent was often a bridge between these realms. It lived in rivers, slithered across land, and often reached toward the sky in myth and art. If the Serpent Mound is a cosmic map, then it may chart a journey through these realms. The spiral tail begins in a depth, perhaps a symbol of descent, darkness, or the underworld. The coiled body moves in and out representing life, struggle, and time. The head and egg face the horizon, the point where heaven and earth meet, the gate to the sky. Each curve could correspond to a celestial event, a ritual phase, or a spiritual transformation. A walk through the stars. Ancient skywatchers did not simply look at the stars, they interpreted them. They found animals, stories, and ancestors in the constellations. They named them and followed their motion across the seasons. Some researchers have suggested that the Serpent Mound may mirror certain star constellations, particularly Draco, the celestial dragon that coils around the North Star. The similarity in shape is striking. Draco is a serpent of the sky, visible in the northern hemisphere throughout the year. It moves in a long curve surrounding Polaris, the fixed point around which the heavens seem to spin. If the Serpent Mound is meant to mirror Draco, it may be a terrestrial reflection of the heavens away to ground the cosmos into the sacred landscape. Solar and lunar alignments revisited, the solstice and lunar standstill alignments discussed earlier add weight to this cosmic interpretation. The head of the serpent aligns with the summer solstice sunset. Several coils point to lunar standstill points. These alignments may mark seasonal ceremonies, agricultural cycles, or ritual times of the year. Rather than a single fixed calendar, the mound may be a rolling, diagram tracking and symbolizing cosmic motion. A place of pilgrimage in many ancient cultures, sacred geometry and cosmology were not abstract. They were lived. People moved through sacred landscapes in ritual journeys, walking symbolic paths, reenacting myths with their bodies. The Serpent Mound may have functioned in this way. Its coils may have been walked slowly in ceremony, each curve a stage in life, each step a prayer, a memory, or a story told through movement. To walk the mound was not just an act of reverence, it was an experience of cosmic order, of returning to the center, to the origin. The centerless center, one of the most beautiful aspects of the Serpent Mound's design, is that it has no true center. It flows from end to end, without a beginning or a conclusion. This too is cosmic. It echoes indigenous understandings of cyclical time as a loop, not a line. Life feeds into death, and death into rebirth. The serpent consumes and creates. The stars spin, the seasons turn, and all things move in the great wheel. The Serpent Mound may be a visual prayer and image of the cosmos that also acts as a guide through it. And so, while we may never fully decode every intention, every alignment, or every meaning, we can still walk the mound with the same awe and curiosity that guided its builders. We can still feel what they saw. A living earth, a sky full of stories. A path that coils forever inward. Section 10. Hidden Geometry and Sacred Math. The Serpent Mound is a sculpture of soil. But it is also a sculpture of geometry. Its elegant curves, consistent proportions, and complex spatial relationships hint at an underlying knowledge, one that blends mathematics, astronomy, and sacred intention. For the people who shaped the mound, geometry may not have been a cold science of numbers, but a spiritual language, a way to align earth with sky, human with cosmos. Let us explore the hidden shapes beneath the surface. You might not immediately notice the precision, but measured from above, the mound reveals patterns, repeating arcs, mirrored curves, and consistent widths that suggest the use of intentional proportioning. For instance, the lengths of the 7 coils are not random. They follow a rhythmic progression, undulating like a sine wave. The egg shape is a near-perfect ellipse and is placed with balance within the serpent's jaws. The spiral tail contains a geometric ratio of roughly 1 to 1 to 1 between its 3 loops, suggesting equal divisions of a sacred or symbolic quantity. This isn't merely aesthetic. The builders may have used sacred geometry, a system of spatial relationships considered to reflect cosmic truths, seen in ancient structures worldwide, from the pyramids to Stonehenge. Geometry without writing. One of the most astonishing aspects of ancient American earthworks is how they were built without metal tools, compasses, or written measurements. How, then, did these ancient peoples achieve such precision? Likely, they used cord and stake systems to mark circles and ellipses, pacing or counting steps to measure distance, natural observation points, such as solar alignments on the horizon, to orient directions. These methods may seem simple by modern standards, but in skilled hands, they were incredibly effective enough to shape massive, harmonious forms that remain intact after 1,000 years. And importantly, the geometry wasn't isolated from meaning. In many ancient traditions, shapes like the circle, the spiral, and the line were symbols of power. The circle equals unity, eternity, the sun. The spiral equals growth, time, inner journeys. The line equals direction, movement, connection between worlds. By shaping these into the earth, the builders were not only expressing math, they were invoking spirit. The golden ratio. Some researchers have noted that certain measurements within the Serpent Mound approximate the golden ratio, the irrational number approximately equal to 1.618, found in natural spirals like shells and galaxies. The length of the serpent's body, when compared to the diameter of the egg, creates a ratio close to phi. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated. But it adds another layer of possibility that the builders recognized patterns in nature and mirrored them in their designs. If so, the mound becomes not just a sacred image, but a reflection of the mathematics of life itself. Alignments and angles. Some studies have focused on the angles of the coils, suggesting that several points along the body align not only with lunar events, but also with cardinal directions and equinox sunsets. In this view, the mound is a calendar, a compass, and a map, one built into the Earth's own body. For example, the serpent's head points to the summer solstice sunset. Several curves align with the major lunar standstills. The tail spiral may align with the winter solstice sunrise. If these alignments are re-land, many scholars believe they are then the builders were tracking long-term celestial cycles, perhaps over generations. They understood the heavens as part of the earth and the earth as a mirror of the stars. Numbers in native cosmology. Some indigenous traditions held certain numbers as sacred, especially for 7 and 13. 4 equals the cardinal directions, seasons, and sacred elements. 7 equals spiritual completeness. 13 equals the number of lunar cycles in a year. It's noteworthy, then, that the serpent has 7 major coils. Was this number symbolic? Did it represent completeness, the phases of life, or a cosmological balance? Perhaps, or perhaps the very act of repeating and coiling was itself symbolic form following ritual, curve following breath. A language of form in the end. The geometry of the Serpent Mound is not only techniclide, is poetic. The curves whisper rather than declare. The ratios hint rather than prove. The entire mound behaves more like a prayer than a machine. And perhaps that is what makes it so powerful. It is a structure of math and myth, precision and mystery, logic and legend. A cosmic formula written in soil and time. Section 11. Myths and misconceptions. Great monuments attract stories. Some stories come from the people who built them. Others are layered on later by explorers, scholars, artists, and dreamers. The Serpent Mound has drawn all these and more. Over the centuries, it has become a canvas for interpretation, misinterpretation, and even misuse. Let us unravel the web of myths and misconceptions surrounding this sacred site, and trace the journey from misunderstanding to deeper truth. Misconception number 1. It was built by a lost civilization in the 19th century. A popular theory circulated among European American scholars and writers that the mounds of North America were too advanced to have been built by indigenous peoples. Instead, some claimed, they must have been the work of a lost race, perhaps the survivors of Atlantis, or ancient Egyptians, or wandering Israelites. These ideas were rooted not in evidence, but in prejudice, a refusal to recognize the complexity and achievements of Native American cultures. It was easier for some to believe in mythical civilizations than to accept the reality that indigenous peoples had shaped the land with vision and care. Thankfully, archaeology has long since disproved these notions. The Serpent Mound, like other great earthworks in the Americas, was built by native hands, native minds, and native hearts like those of the Adena, Hopewell, or Fort ancient cultures. It is not a relic of a lost race. It is the legacy of living traditions. Misconception number 2. It's just a burial site because many native mounds were used as burial places. Some early excavators assumed the Serpent Mound served the same purpose. But multiple excavations, including those led by Frederick Ward Putnam in the 1880s, found no burials within the serpent itself. There are nearby burial mounds which belong to the Adena and possibly the Fort ancient cultures, but the serpent is empty. It is a ceremonial effigy, not a tomb. Its emptiness is part of its power. It is not filled with bodies. It is filled with meaning. Misconception number 3. It's meant to be seen from above. With modern drones and photography, we often view the Serpent Mound from the air. It is breathtaking. This has led some to suggest it was built to be seen from the sky, perhaps by ancient astronauts or celestial beings. But in ancient times, there were no aircraft and no way to see the full design from above. So why build such a precise image if no one could view it in its entirety? Because ancient people did not need to see the whole to understand the whole. they walked the curves. They knew the form from memory and story. Much like a labyrinth or a cathedral, the Serpent Mound was meant to be experienced, not simply observed. Misconception number 4. It's unconnected to astronomy. For years, some archaeologists dismissed the idea that the Serpent Mound had astronomical alignment, arguing that any such connection was coincidental or unproven. But mounting evidence, including studies on lunar standstills, solstice points, and alignments with nearby mounds, suggest the site does, in fact, have celestial meaning. The builders were not guessing, they were observing, calculating, aligning. The serpent's form is not just artistic, but cosmic. Misconception number 5. It belongs to the past alone, perhaps. The greatest misconception is that the Serpent Mound is simply a relica dead object from a forgotten world. But for many indigenous people, the mound is not history. It is living. It is a ceremonial space, a place of memory, a site of pilgrimage and prayer. Ceremonies are still held there. Offerings are left, drums are played, songs are sung. The serpent is not sleeping. It is listening. Section 12. The landscape around the mound, while the serpent. Mound itself commands attention with its graceful coils and ancient symbolism. It does not stand alone. It is part of a greater landscape, one just as steeped in mystery, natural wonder, and sacred geometry as the mound itself. The land is never passive. In the story of the past it is a participant. And the hills, ridges, and valleys of southern Ohio were not randomly chosen for this earthwork. The setting of the Serpent Mound was likely deliberate, chosen for its geological uniqueness, visibility, water sources, and perhaps even for the spiritual energy believed to emanate from it. A ridge above the forest. The Serpent Mound rests on a narrow plateau ridge that rises above the surrounding forest. This ridge is striking for its elevation, a natural vantage point, offering long, open views of the horizon in multiple directions. From the head of the serpent, one can look westward across the undulating canopy, watching the sun drop behind distant hills during the summer solstice sunset. The placement enables astronomical observation, but also likely held ceremonial meaning. The higher ground was closer to the sky, closer to the spirit world. The mound is not built in a valley or along a flat riverbank. It is set apart, commanding a kind of natural stage of feature that may have made it both powerful and sacred to ancient peoples. The Serpent Mound Crater, a landscape born of fire. Beneath the mound lies something even more remarkable. A prehistoric impact crater. Yes, the very ridge that the serpent winds along is part of what geologists call the Serpent Mound. Disturbance, a circular geological structure nearly 5 miles wide believed to have been caused by either a meteorite impact or volcanic uplift hundreds of millions of years ago. This strange formation caused layers of rock to bend, fracture, and rise in unusual patterns. Even without modern tools, ancient peoples may have noticed that the area was geologically unique, with strange rocks, springs, and terrain not found elsewhere nearby. The idea that the mound's builders recognized and respected the crater is not far-fetched. To them, it may have been seen as a sacred wound in the earth, or a power spot, a place where Earth's energy pulsed differently. This may have been one of the reasons why the serpent was placed here, coiled protectively atop an ancient scar in the planet's skin. Brush Creek and the element of water. To the south of the Serpent Mound flows Brush Creek, a winding stream that cuts through the valley like a silver ribbon. Water was not only vital for survival, it was symbolically sacred in many native traditions. Water was a pathway to the underworld. It mirrored the sky. It carried spirits. It flowed in cycles like time. The proximity of Brush Creek to the serpent adds yet another layer to its design. The serpent's body may mimic the creek's own curves. Echoing waters flow in the form of the mound. Some researchers believe that the serpent's placement between land and water, elevated and overlooking, was meant to symbolize the connection between realms, water, sky. Nearby mounds and earthworks. The Serpent Mound is not isolated in purpose either. Close to its coils lie several burial mounds, likely constructed by the Adena people. These conical earthworks once held the remains of important individuals, as well as offerings such as tools, pipes, and sacred items. Some of these burial mounds align with celestial points of their own, and may have been part of a larger ceremonial complex, with the Serpent Mound as the central figure, surrounded by places of rest, reflection, and rite. To the broader region, Ohio is dotted with thousands of ancient earthworks. From the vast Hopewell complexes at Newark and Chillicothe, to the mysterious circle and octagon alignments at Mound City. It's clear that this part of the continent was once a thriving spiritual and ceremonial landscape. The Serpent Mound may have been a nexus in that sacred Webba pilgrimage destination, a calendar, a symbol of transformation. The power of place. Modern visitors often speak of a feeling when they arrive at the site. Some call it energy. Others say it's a sense of peace, or timelessness, or sacred gravity. Whether such experiences are spiritual or psychological, the land evokes emotion. Its silence feels intentional. Its form seems to listen. To ancient builders, the land was alive. Not just dirt and stone, but spirit. To carve a mound into the earth was to communicate with that spirit, to harmonize with the forces that shaped the world. And so the ridge, the crater, the stream, and the forest are not just background. They are characters in the story of the Serpent Mound, and they are still here, listening. Section 13. Pilgrimage, Visitors, and Spiritual Revival. The Serpent Mound is an ancient creation, but it is not just a relic. It is a living Siddha, place where the past continues to touch the present. In recent decades, the mound has become a place of pilgrimage for native peoples reclaiming their heritage. For spiritual seekers drawn by ancient energy, for historians, astronomers, and casual travelers alike. The winding path of the serpent draws them all, and each person comes seeking something different. Return of the first people. For many indigenous peoples, especially those with ancestral ties to the Ohio Valley, the Serpent Mound is a sacred legacy. It is not simply an archaeological site. It is a spiritual being, an ancestor, a teacher. Today, groups such as the Shawnee, Miami, Delaware, and others return to the site to offer tobacco, to hold ceremonies, and to reconnect with ancestral wisdom that colonial displacement once tried to erase. These visits are not tourist trips. They are acts of reclamation. They are ways of breathing life back into cultural knowledge that survived in spite of forced removals, boarding schools, and centuries of suppression. The serpent has waited, and its people are returning. New Age and spiritual seekers. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the Serpent Mound also became a destination for a different kind of pilgrim, those drawn by energy, by cosmic curiosity, or by alternative spirituality. The mound is now often included in maps of Earth energy vortexes alongside places like Sedona and Glastonbury. Some believe the serpent lies along ley lines, invisible channels of planetary energy. While these ideas are not based on indigenous tradition, they reflect a modern hunger for connection to the land, to the past, to something larger than the self. Drum circles, solstice, gatherings, meditation groups have found their way to the coils. And while some worry about cultural appropriation, others see these events as proof that the mound still speaks, still calls, still teaches. The summer solstice gathering, perhaps the most celebrated modern event at the Serpent Mound, is the Summer Solstice Festival. Each year, near the end of June, people gather to watch the sun set in line with the serpent's head, just as it likely did 1,000 years ago. The event draws astronomers, artists, native elders, musicians, and spiritual communities. As the sky turns orange and the last light hovers above the western hills, a hush often falls over the crowd. They are watching a moment repeated over centuries, perhaps over millennia. The sun and serpent meeting again, a cycle renewing itself. It is a living ritual, one that reconnects time, nature, and humanity. Education and protection. Organizations like the Arc of Appalachia Preserve System and the Ohio History Connection, have worked to protect the site, build educational centers, and restore native biodiversity around the mound. Visitors can now walk interpretive trails, view aerial models, and learn about the cultures who shaped the land long before Columbus ever sailed. For students, families, and curious minds, the Serpent Mound offers a bridge not just to the past, but two different ways of seeing the world. Ways where time is secular, where land is sacred, and where symbols carry spirit. A place that grows the Serpent Mound is no longer just a monument, it is a movement. A movement toward remembrance, toward humility before the ancient ones who walked before us. It is a place where history is not locked in stone, but written in soil. A place where each visitor leaves a little change, a little quieter, a little more aware. The serpent doesn't speak with words, but it teaches us still. Section 14. Serpent across cultures, a universal symbol. The serpent slithers not only through the forests of Ohio, but through the collective imagination of humanity. Across cultures, continents, and millennia, the serpent has appeared in sacred stories, art, and architecture. In some, it is a protector. In others, a trickster, a creator, or a destroyer. It is one of the most universal mythological figures ever known, found in indigenous America, ancient India, Mesoamerica, Africa, Europe, and beyond. Why the serpent? Because it sheds its skin. Because it moves between elements through grass, water, rock. Because it can be beautiful, deadly, silent, wise. The builders of the Serpent Mound were not alone in their reverence. They were part of a global tradition, one that saw in the serpent something profoundly symbolic. North America, the underworld guardian among many Native American cultures, the serpent is a being of great power. In the traditions of the Mississippian and Hopewell peoples, serpents were often linked to the underworld, to water, and to the cycle of life and death. They dwelled in rivers and caves, places where the veil between worlds was thin. Some stories speak of the horned serpent, massive, often winged or antlered snake, that could control storms and guarded hidden knowledge. These beings were neither good nor evil, but forces of balance, protectors of sacred places. The Serpent Mound, in this context, could be understood as a physical, invocational shaped spirit, a guardian formed from soil. To walk along its back may have been to seek blessing, wisdom, or vision. Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. To the south, in ancient Mexico, the great god Quetzalcoatl ruled the heavens, a feathered serpent who brought knowledge, calendars, and agriculture to humanity. Quetzalcoatl, whose name means precious serpent, was a creator and culture hero, often associated with the planet Venus and with resurrection. temples to him such as those in Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza feature serpent imagery prominently. In these cultures, the serpent was not underground but celestial, weaving between stars and guiding the world's destiny. Though the builders of the Serpent Mound and the Maya, Aztec civilizations were separated by time and geography, the symbolic parallels are striking. A serpent tied to the cosmos. A serpent connected to rebirth and celestial cycles. A serpent as teacher, guardian, and divine bridge. India. Kundalini and cosmic power in Hindu and yogic philosophy. The Kundalini is a coiled serpent resting at the base of the human spinoform of spiritual energy that rises when awakened, bringing insight and enlightenment. The serpent here is internal, symbolic of transformation and awakening. The act of walking the serpent mirrors the inner journey toward balance, vision, and truth. Could the physical coils of the Serpent Mound have reflected an inner spiritual journey? Again, though the cultural connections are unlikely to be direct, the universality of the serpent symbol suggests that ancient peoples across the world were tapping into similar truth, emotional, astronomical, and spiritual. Africa and Europe, cycles and guardianship in West African traditions. Serpents, like Dan, are divine beings that support the universe. In ancient Egypt, the serpent Mayan coiled around the sun god Ra to protect him during the night journey through the underworld. In Greek tradition, the Ouroboros serpent eating its own tail symbolizes eternity, the cyclical nature of life and infinity. From Celtic knots to Norse Jarmungandr, the world serpent cultures across Europe told stories of massive serpents that held the world together, surrounded the oceans, or guarded sacred wells. These are not just fanciful tales. They are part of a shared human effort to explain reality, to give form to time, life, death, and what lies beyond. Why the serpent endures. The serpent has always lived at the boundary between land and water, life and death, wisdom and danger. It is an ambiguous figure, capable of both creation and destruction. It reminds us that power is never simple, that nature is sacred and wild, that the unseen is as real as what we can touch. The builders of the Serpent Mound may not have known of Quetzalcoatl or Mahan or the Kundalini, but they understood the language of the serpent. They saw in it a form worthy of reverence, and so they gave it shape. 1,300 feet long, alive in the earth. Section 15. Legacy of the Mound. What it means today, the Serpent Mound has survived storms, centuries, and civilizations. It has outlasted empires and prejudices, forgotten languages, and fading maps. And still, it lies, quietly winding through the soil of Ohio, unchanged and unchanging, yet also alive in meaning. As we reach the end of this journey through time, we ask the question, what does the Serpent Mound mean today? To some, it is a mystery. To others, a sacred site. For many, it is a reminder that what we build in harmony with nature can endure far longer than anything built in conquest. A story reclaimed for native peoples, the Serpent Mound is part of a wider reclamation of history. After centuries of dispossession, erasure, and suppression, indigenous voices are rising again. Archaeologists now work more closely with tribal historians. Oral traditions are being preserved, and young native scholars are leading the way in interpreting sacred landscapes, not just as relics but as living cultural expressions. The Serpent Mound stands as a symbol of cultural survival, proof that long before European contact, sophisticated knowledge systems existed on this land. Knowledge of the sky, of time, of spirit, of earth. A lesson in time. There is something humbling about the Serpent Mound. It reminds us that time is not a straight line. It coils, it returns. It winds its way through lives and generations, always moving, yet always circling back to the origin. Modern life is fast, digital, noisy, but when you walk the quiet curve of the serpent's back, time slows. The wind becomes a voice, the sky a mirror. You feel small and more connected than ever. It is a place where time is not measured in seconds, but in seasons, solstices, shadows, a place to remember how to look. A teacher without words, the Serpent Mound doesn't explain itself. It doesn't speak English. It doesn't offer signs or step-by-step instructions. It invites us to observe, to reflect, to feel. In this way, it teaches differently than a museum or a textbook. It teaches through presence, through silence, through geometry and mystery and the movement of the sun. That kind of education can't be replicated in a screen or a scroll. It is the education of the land, of place, of breath and space. And in that way, it is more needed now than ever. A global symbol. The Serpent Mound is a local site with global meaning. It reminds us that ancient people everywhere, no matter how distant, were united by a desire to understand their world, to mark the stars, to honor the dead, to live in harmony with forces they could not fully name. It reminds us that technology does not define sophistication, spirit does. And it reminds us that sometimes the best way to leave a message for the future is not in concrete or code, but in earth shaped with care. The final coil, as you leave the Serpent Mound, you might look back one more time. The curves ripple through the grass, the trees sway, a hawk circles overhead. You have not only visited a place, you have walked a story older than your country, older than your books, older than the language in which you're reading these words. And that story continues. In the stars, in the soil. In those who remember in, those shall remember in, the serpent lies in wait. Not sleeping, but watching, teaching, enduring, forever coiled, forever alive.